My name is MacLennan. I'm currently a Director for Social Media Strategy. Previously, I worked at the Air Ambulance Service as Head of Digital and Innovation. That was part of my job title, so it's obviously quite important to the director who hired me. Previous to that, I worked at brands including Red Bull as Global Digital Editorial Manager, Barclaycard, and my background was media, so I worked in BBC, ITN, STV, The Herald, all of those in digital positions, and always doing quite innovative things at each of those places as well. And currently, as well as my full-time role, then I'm a trustee for a international, I think Mediumsized is the correct term for it, a water charity called Just a Drop. So I've been there for a few months now, and that's really good because the Air Ambulance Service is classified as a large charity, so different considerations and different things you can and can't do given the resources. So, to me, in a way that's funny to friends, because I don't always come across as an optimistic person, I have a very optimistic view of what innovation is and about what we can do in the future. I guess from my perspective then, innovation is about how you push things forward, how you improve upon what's come before, and how you work to deliver something that fulfills the goals, meets the mission much more effectively, also creates new possibilities that might not have existed before. I think from my perspective then, with the Air Ambulance Service and other roles, then I've come into jobs and had to explain to people what I do and why I do it. With the innovation side of things, especially in the charity sector, how I'd explain that is the fact that I think there's a tremendous potential to do really great things. The sector itself, as everybody knows, suffers from resource issues. It's very much dependent upon people providing money or other resources. And I think that innovation is a great way of introducing new ways of getting more for less. It's a cliche term, but I think it does apply in that circumstance. And also approaches for doing things in ways that can help articulate the message or do what you need to do through digital capabilities much better than you have done before. So yes, when I would come in to meet people that were potentially skeptical and worked in the charity sector for years, then I'd always try and take a positive approach about it in terms of expressing what it does. And it's not here to remove anybody's jobs or to shrink down the amount of people that are working in the charity. It's very much to help them do what they do and be able to do it better and hopefully get better results from that as well. Okay. From my point of view, I think, I would say it's definitely an enabler. I think the charity sector has been around for a long, long time, and innovation is something that has existed since the start of that. Whoever started the first charity wasn't an innovator. I think the term and the idea of innovation has become much more fashionable over the past few years. But I think you'll find that the largest charities are ones that had previously innovated and done great things. And I think that, at the moment there's thousands of charities all competing for the attention of a limited group of people. I think that the sector as a whole is competing against other things that are also after the attention of the audience. So I think sometimes people are a bit too protected about what they're doing because they're worried that somebody else has snatched it away another charity. But I think that when you look upon it in terms of the daily activities of a potential giver, then they're on social media, they're on their phones, they're looking at a variety of different media and different things coming in. They've got a very limited time for each of those. Increasingly, their attention span is decreasing as the amount of things that they are contemplating increases. So the sector as a whole has to think about how you can make sure that you grab their attention and that you can provide something that they don't get elsewhere. I think innovation enables the capabilities to provide something that does that, and I think at the same time then it can be, what's the best way of putting it? I think as well as being an enabler, then it can provide potential solutions that didn't exist before. And I think those things that we can see in certain parts of the sector are very exciting and should be explored as well. So with that, I'm kind of thinking specifically about things such as cryptocurrency and the means of being able to use people's time rather than money, kind of non-financial giving. I think there's a lot of potential in those areas.
Yeah.
So the air ambulance service became the first charity in the entire world to use a crypto mining tool that allows people who wish to give us money a means of doing that without actually spending money. So they use the processing power of their computers. It's an interesting story in the sense that around the beginning of this year, then I was speaking to some agencies that specialise in the charity sector about things that we could do in terms of refurbishing our digital presence, is maybe one way of putting it, but also doing potentially an innovations project of some sort. From my perspective, I thought that we wanted to show ourselves to be leaders in the field, and that would help us not only in terms of income and in terms of awareness, but also establishing ourselves as a charity that's not afraid to take risks and do exciting things when we've weighed that and decide that there's real potential there. It's something that I did at Red Bull, and I thought that we could do that in the charity sector as well. So one of the agencies had actually proposed the idea of doing crypto mining and using a website browser to be able to raise cryptocurrency. So for those people who don't know too much about crypto mining, then it basically uses processing power of the computer to then mine for cryptocurrency. So that could be well-known ones such as Bitcoin, or it could be one of the several other less well-known cryptocurrencies that are out there. When that was presented to us, it was in the very early, just an idea rather than anything too concrete. And it seemed to me to be really interesting, and the idea of being one of the first charities to do that was really exciting, but at the same time, the cost seemed too much to be able to justify. And we were aware of the fact that crypto mining is something that's quite processor intensive, so there was some environmental concerns as well about the electricity that's used to generate that. So at that time we didn't feel like it was the right thing to do. But then just weeks later, then we were then recommended a startup called Kudo, who are doing what's called Kudo Donate. So they've taken that idea separately from the other agency had pitched it, but they productized it. So I think from my point of view as a charity that wasn't one of the major charities, what's kind of exciting about tools like Kudo Donate was the fact that because they're productizing it and offering it to a number of charities, then rather than have to develop it and pay for it ourselves individually, then the cost is borne by the company. So there's no upfront cost to us, which means that we can experiment with this, innovate with this, and then the financial risk is nil. So I expressed an interest and we discussed with them. There's a few guarantees that we wanted to get about how that worked, about the safety of the software, about the how it would be for the users, making sure that they're protected, and also addressing some of those other concerns in terms of environmental. So specifically with that, then Kudo Donate was doing carbon offsetting, which meant that one of those big things that we weren't too sure about, just in terms of the consequences itself, and also negative PR was something that they'd already addressed, which is really good. So from my perspective, when we launched it, then the benefits for us would be financial. How much that would be, we weren't too sure, but we knew that would be positive, and we also knew that from that point of view of both externally from a PR perspective, but also internally, then we'd be seen as a charity that's kind of pushing things forward, and that we're looking at the best ways of using new tools to fulfill the goals and missions of our charity. I think I was very fortunate that the director who'd hired me was extremely keen on the idea of innovation, and she put that into the job title that I took on. So she was definitely a very positive presence there, and somebody who saw the benefits of innovation and what that could add to the charity. I think within the charity sector, and that applies to the air ambulance service, but other examples that I've seen, I think there's always going to be varying levels of support for innovation, and I think some of that comes with quite well-founded skepticism based upon their years in the sector, that I'm not going to come in and then just pretend that it hasn't existed, or I'm not going to, I don't think it's a positive approach to simply sweep aside away people's concerns. I think it's good to talk about what, in the case of the ambulance service, my plans were for innovation, how I thought I could benefit the charity, how I thought I could help increase income, increase awareness, and therefore lead to the charity growing, becoming more successful. I think with any process, when you're starting from a position that's not advanced, then it's a slow process. It's not something that happens overnight. I think some people will be straight on board with it. Some people will take a little bit of persuasion, not too much. And then some people, not necessarily because they're against it, but because they have a lot of their own priorities, things that they have to do in their roles, will either take a lot more persuasion, or just it takes time to be aware of it and what that means. So what I always think is quite interesting is the fact that if you talk about something that first time, there'll be some people in the room that instantly will be on board for it, but some people just won't think too much about it, or won't even pay too much attention because of the other priorities. So it's almost like an evangelical process that you're going around, and then sometimes will be multiple times where somebody actually understands what you're talking about, and sometimes that might be down to you. You could have expressed it better. But sometimes it's just because when you're talking about innovation, then it can be hard to wrap your head around it, especially if it's about areas that it's not part of your traditional job role. One of the reasons that I moved to Red Bull was the fact that they've been so innovative in what they've done pretty much since they started, especially in terms of the content marketing and that side of things. Was something where I'd worked at a brand previously, and then within the media, where we'd been producing content, and then you see Red Bull doing things which is much more exciting, seems tremendously risky, but then also has these great rewards to it. So when I moved there, I hope that I'd get some lessons of how you manage to do that. And I definitely think that how you define your brand, and some people are a bit skeptical about the importance of branding, but I think the brand platform that Red Bull has is something that you can definitely feel infuses everything that they do. And from my time there, everybody that I worked with and all the experiences I had always felt like there was a commonality and consistency to it, in terms of trying to do something that felt special, that would appeal to the audience and would be slightly audacious. sometimes very audacious, depending on what the project was. That wasn't to say, as I think some people would then think, that it was risk positive in a reckless way. I think what was really interesting from my time there is that Red Bull would take a lot of risks, but it'd always be carefully considered, and when something would go ahead, then they would make sure that they did everything that they could so that they planned and prepared for every eventuality, which is really impressive. And it meant that when I moved to the Air Ambulance Service, which is my next role after that, then I brought with me some of that idea of being risk positive in sensible and pragmatic ways. If you think about an air ambulance charity, there's numerous ways in which you can't be risk positive in a way that you are at Red Bull, because it's a very different situation. And for me, it was really interesting to come in and first of all learn from people working at the charity, because there's ideas I had that just wouldn't be doable, because it would place the charity in jeopardy in terms of its reputation, and that's paramount. So when you're a medical charity and when you're dealing with patients and patient confidentiality, then you can't just have a harebrained idea and then go ahead with it with something that might impact upon them. So it had to be a very considered approach, but at the same time, I think in terms of the charity situation of wanting to raise a lot more awareness and funds, then there was a positivity for about how we would do that. I think in terms of what I've noticed generally with the charity sector, as opposed to my time in brands, is that there is more cautiousness, and I do think that the cautiousness is merited, but that means that sometimes people will go into a negative space and will have a very reluctant attitude to try things. And that can be something that becomes pervasive as well. So in the way that you can go to Red Bull and it's very risk positive, and that infuses, or not so much risk positivity, in the way that the culture of the organisation was very positive, then I think the charity sector sometimes, with the idea of innovation, it can feel a bit more negative, because people are concerned and because what's at stake matters more, arguably. So not to be too... Like with brands, then obviously there's things at stake and things that do matter, and but I think with a charity, then there can be lives that are at stake. So with an air ambulance charity, then that is something where they save lives. So I think the idea of taking risks is something that has more consequence to it. So I think people can then become risk averse for a very good reason, but then by becoming more risk adverse, that becomes a negative attitude that then can mean that potential opportunities are not taken that would be good to take. Yeah. And I think it's a really interesting balancing act. And I think with any organisation, there's always going to be a balancing act between the kind of safety and doing something that you know is going to work, and then the risk, which brings bigger benefits, but who knows what might happen. I think with the charity sector, then, because there's more at stake, then the idea of playing it safe makes a lot more sense. But through that, then I think then opportunities are missed. And I think, but what I think is interesting is it does also provide opportunities to certain types of charities as well. So something that something from my perspective that was interesting was arriving at a medium-sized charity. I could see that with medium-sized charities and small charities, then the idea of doing things that are innovative and then growing a much faster rate by taking those measured risks means that it's a means of competing against larger charities that, because of the size of what they do, then have to be a lot more cautious. So I think there's definitely a reward to smaller and medium-sized charities through making sure that the balance between risk and playing it safe is maybe slightly more towards, I wouldn't want to call it being more risky, just like, but being more audacious, thinking about marketing and thinking about how to stand out. And I think as well, separating it out in terms of the size of the charity, I think it's also about the functions. So I think there's a difference between being risk positive in terms of the day-to-day activities that you do to save lives or to improve people's lives, and then something like the marketing activity. So I think sometimes the cautiousness that people will have for what affects the people that they're trying to help through the charity sometimes means that they're too cautious in terms of things like marketing, where actually you could be stand out, be bolder, and it's not going to affect the patients or the people being helped, but it can help your charity stand out and raise more income or raise more awareness through that. I think in terms of with innovation, then it generally comes from a wide awareness of what's going on. So from my own experience, then as somebody who hadn't worked in the charity sector up until the air ambulance service, what I want to do is steep myself in it as much as possible and get to know as much about what's happening, what other charities are doing, and also how that compares. So I guess one piece of advice I might have in terms of innovation is it's good to look at the charity sector and see what the charity sector is doing, but it's also very helpful to look at the wider, for example, digital space, if that's what your role is within, and then seeing what's going on there and seeing what the biggest brands are doing. You know, those companies that have the biggest finances and can do amazing things. And I'm not suggesting that you'll be able to do those things that Pepsi or Microsoft are doing, but you'll see that elements from that will start bleeding down and become either cheaper or more achievable through other means as well. So if you see that a certain, to take a content marketing perspective, if you see that certain content types are doing really well, then there might be achievable ways that are much cheaper, or there might be those tools packaged in a way that becomes more affordable or requires less manpower. You know, one example of that would be to do video. Like right now, you're recording that on your phone, and it's not so long ago that to do anything of that sort of quality would cost you thousands of pounds, tens of thousands of pounds, and now it costs you effectively nothing. So I think that how you use tools, I think you can get inspiration from those kind of larger brands, or just a kind of general general world, really. Yeah. Something else that you can do in terms of innovation is very much trying to make friends in terms of the charity sector as well and get to know people. So I find it very helpful with the likes of Charity Comms, Institute of Fundraising. There's many other organisations there that provide a chance to get to know people and see what people are up to. Some conferences will cost more money than you can afford, but there will be, whether it's through websites, whether it's through digital conferences, there'll be other means of getting to hear from people who are quite inspirational and good voices within the sector itself. Yeah, from my own experience, I remember hearing a number of years ago, and I can't remember who I heard it from, but the idea of, if you think about a football team and the idea of having extremely gifted, talented, the likes of Messi or Maradona specifically, who can do amazing, wondrous things that nobody's seen before. But actually for any sort of football team, then you need a lot of those kind of solid players, and you need to be effective and do what you do well. And then through that, you can have these kind of iconic figures that do these wonderful things. I always thought a bit similar with the idea of innovation in terms of it's an amazing thing when you see innovation that's really effective and is impressive, but it doesn't mean anything if what's behind that isn't solid. So when I would arrive in an organisation, then what I'd basically be doing is having something of a dual approach, but the priority, dual approach is maybe a bit misleading because it's not giving the same resources to each. I think the focus has to be upon the basics of what you're doing. So as head of digital innovation, then making sure that the digital proposition is really solid, that you're covering those bases, that's really effective.